The tragedy of Mariah Carey is that the world only hears her voice, but never hears the cry for help inside her. We remember the five-octave vocal range that left audiences breathless. Remember the melisma technique that twists and turns every note, which an entire generation of singers after her, from Christina Aguilera to Beyoncé to Ariana Grande, all tried to imitate but never fully recreated. We remember 19 songs climbing to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. More than any solo artist, remember the whistle register note, soaring to heights no other vocalist has reached. And remember the melody of All I Want for Christmas Is You, ringing out in every shopping mall, every airport, every Christmas party. That is the Mariah the world chooses to remember, the light, the glory, the queen. But what lies beneath that voice? What the world often doesn't see or doesn't want to see is a multiracial little girl growing up in Long Island. Too white for the black community, too black for the white community, not belonging to any corner in her own neighborhood, is a 23-year-old bride whose husband, more than 20 years older, one of the most powerful men in the music industry, pressed the flat side of a butter knife against her right cheek, dragged the metal strip down her face in front of the silent complicity of the entire room, is a superstar at her peak suddenly collapsing on national television, pushing an ice cream cart onto the stage in a state of chaos, and being turned into a joke by the whole world before the word meme even existed, is a woman diagnosed with bipolar disorder who then hid that diagnosis for 17 years, living in denial, isolation, and constant fear that someone would expose the only secret she didn't dare face, is a daughter who received news that her mother and sister passed away on the same day. The last two threads connecting her to her birth family severed at once, not by reconciliation, but by death. The highest whistle note in the world, but the woman who produced that note was once imprisoned in her own home. The Christmas queen who brings joy to millions of families every holiday season, but she herself has lost almost her entire biological family. The voice that heals millions of lonely hearts around the world, but her own heart is not always healed. Today, behind the face of the 57-year-old woman whom Guinness World Records calls the highest note singer, is a question more haunting than any note she has ever sung. How can a woman continue to sing for the world when her own life keeps taking away every reason to sing? Before we look through the voice to find the woman behind it, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like for Mariah. Mariah Carey was born on March 27, 1969 in Huntington, New York, the youngest of 3 siblings. Her brother Morgan, 9 years older, her sister Allison, 6 years older. Her mother, Patricia Carey, was a Juilliard-trained opera singer who had performed with the New York City Opera, an Irish-descended soprano carrying the pride of a classical artist. Her father, Alfred Roy Carey, was an aeronautical engineer of African-American and Venezuelan descent, a quiet man living in a country that had never fully accepted his skin color. They loved each other enough to marry, enough to have 3 children, but not enough to keep the home intact. When Mariah was 3, her parents divorced, and the family foundation cracked not with a bang, but with a long, simmering fracture that echoed for years afterward. The house after the divorce was never truly quiet. Or more precisely, it was quiet in the wrong way. The quiet of emptiness when her father was absent, then suddenly erupting into noise, even worse than silence. Mariah grew up witnessing violence happening right within the walls that were supposed to protect her. In her memoir, she recounts the moment her brother Morgan pushed her mother with such force that her body slammed into the wall, producing a sharp sound like a gunshot. Then she crumpled to the floor, her legs buckling, her whole body going limp as if her bones had melted. The child Mariah stood watching, eyes frozen in place, one instant, one eternity. Her sister Allison, whom Mariah later described as deeply traumatized, had been drawn into addiction from a very early age, and, according to what Mariah revealed in her memoir, had once given her medication when she was still a child. This was not a home where you returned for safety. This was a home where you learned to survive by finding an escape, and outside that home, the world was no more welcoming. Mariah was a multiracial child growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood on Long Island, and that identity did not bring her the richness people often romanticize. It brought isolation. She was too white to be fully accepted by the black community. She was too black for the white neighborhood to stop looking at her as an outsider. She existed in the gray area between two worlds belonging to neither, pushed to the margins by both sides with glances, unspoken questions, and the thick silence of racism ingrained in daily life. That discrimination did not come in a single event that could be pointed to and named. It came through accumulation, day after day, week after week, until the young Mariah understood that she would have to find somewhere else to belong, because where she lived would never make room for her. And then she found that place, not at an address, not with a person, but in her own voice. Patricia, no matter how complicated the mother-daughter relationship was, recognized the extraordinary talent in her youngest daughter from a very early age and began teaching her to sing. But the relationship between Mariah and her mother was never simple enough to be encapsulated in the beautiful image of a mother passing on her craft to her daughter. Mariah describes it as a thorny thread interwoven with pride and pain, shame and gratitude, jealousy and admiration, disappointment and love, all tangled together inseparably. She revealed that she felt significantly neglected by her mother throughout her childhood, and that when she began to succeed, her mother carried with her a jealousy, the quiet jealousy of a talented woman who had not reached the heights her daughter had achieved. The paradox lies here, and it would haunt Mariah throughout her life. The woman who gave her the voice, the only tool for her to escape this life, was also the one who caused part of the trauma she needed to escape from. The voice was both a gift from her mother and a ticket away from her mother. But in childhood, Mariah did not yet know that paradox. She only knew that when she sang, everything stopped. When the voice rose, she was no longer the multiracial child who belonged nowhere. Not the daughter neglected by her mother, not the little sister given medication by her sister, not the child standing watching her mother crumple to the floor. She was only the voice, and the voice had no skin color, no broken family, no address in the wrong neighborhood. The voice was pure, the voice was free. The voice was the only refuge that no one could take away, or at least, that's what she believed at the time. After graduating high school, Mariah left Long Island and moved to Manhattan with a single dream in her pocket and almost nothing else. She worked as a waitress, served parties, sang backup for singer Brenda Kay, starred in small clubs, slept on the floors of cramped apartments, and for the first time in her life, tasted something like real freedom. The freedom that came from finally escaping the unstable home, escaping the discriminatory neighborhood, escaping the atmosphere that wore her down a little more each day. She carried with her a demo tape, recorded her voice in the cheapest studios her waitress wages could afford. That small tape would change her life forever, but not in the way she imagined. At a music industry party, Brenda K-Star placed the demo tape into the hands of Tommy Mottola, the executive at Columbia Records, one of the most powerful men in American music history. Mottola listened to the tape on his drive home, and that very night he decided he had to own this voice. Own it. Not collaborate. Not support. Own it. The 18-year-old girl, who had just escaped one prison home, did not know she was stepping into another prison home, bigger, more luxurious, and 1,000 times harder to escape. In 1988, Mariah was 18, working as a waitress in Manhattan. Mottola was 40, married with 2 children, sitting atop the Columbia Records empire. The gap between them was not an age gap, but an abyss of power. He listened to the tape on his drive home and ordered to find this girl by any means necessary. The Sony music machine began to move, and everything happened at dizzying speed. Mottola signed her recording contract, invested fully, outbid rival labels, demanded reshoots of the first video until it met his standards. Her debut album, titled Mariah Carey, released in 1990, and exploded in a way the music industry rarely witnessed. All 4 singles reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, starting with Vision of Love, a song that was not only a commercial hit but a milestone that changed the way the world sang. The melisma style Mariah introduced, the way she twists and turns a single note through dozens of variations in one breath, became the standard for the entire generation after her. Christina Aguilera, Beyoncé, Ariana Grande all admitted that Vision of Love was the life-changing moment for them. The Grammys awarded her Best New Artist and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. She was 20 years old. Career-wise, everything was perfect to the point of unreal. Personally, the trap was tightening. Mottola divorced his wife to pursue Mariah, despite the warnings from his own therapist, despite the pain caused to his 2 children. They married in 1993. She was 23. He was 43. And the slow march into captivity began. Not in one night, not with a declaration, but by tightening little by little until Mariah realized she was living in a prison she didn't remember agreeing to enter. The enormous mansion in the suburbs of New York, which from the outside anyone would see as a palace, Mariah called by another name, Sing Sing, after the most notorious prison in New York State. Armed guards stood watch, security cameras monitored everywhere. She was not allowed to talk to anyone not under Tommy's control, not allowed to go out, not allowed to socialize with other musicians, could not move freely in her own home. One night, while recording a remix for Always Be My Baby, Mariah went out for a late-night meal with producer Jermaine Dupri, rapper Da Brat, and the group Escape, colleagues she was working with in the studio. Tommy sent an armed search team to find her. An armed search team to find an adult woman having dinner with colleagues. And Mariah coped in the way only those truly imprisoned understand. She secretly maintained a small apartment in New York that Tommy didn't know about. A hidden space where she could breathe for a few hours without surveillance. The world's top superstar had to hide like an escaped prisoner just to have a few hours of freedom in her own life. But Mottola didn't stop at controlling her life. He controlled what Mariah considered her soul, music. He forced her to focus on glossy-produced ballads, suitable for the white pop market, safe songs for mainstream radio. Mariah, the daughter of an African-American and Venezuelan father, naturally gravitated toward R&B and hip-hop, genres that reflected the half of her identity she had never been able to fully express. Tommy wanted to eliminate the urban element, and in this context, urban was not a music term, but a polite way of saying erasing the black half inside her. The most painful paradox lies here. The voice, the only refuge the young Mariah had ever found in Long Island, was now also being controlled. She turned to music to escape her childhood. But in this marriage, music also became a prison. The last refuge was violated. And what made everything more complicated was that success was still enormously huge throughout this period. Music Box in 1993 sold more than 30 million copies. Merry Christmas in 1994 gifted the world a song that would become immortal. Daydream in 1995 gave birth to One Sweet Day with Boyz II Men, 16 consecutive weeks at #1, a historic record. From the outside, Mariah was the most successful woman in the music industry of the 90s. From inside Sing Sing, she was a wife with no right to leave the house. Who did that success belong to? Mariah or Tommy? That was the question she had to answer for herself in the darkness of the velvet-wrapped mansion. Then came the moment when all endurance reached its limit. In their kitchen, in front of the people Tommy called colleagues, Mottola picked up a butter knife from the dining set on the table, walked over to Mariah, pressed the flat side of the blade against her right cheek. Every muscle in her face tightened, her whole body froze, her lungs hardened. Tommy held the knife there. The men in the room watched and said not a word. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly dragged the thin, cold metal strip down her burning hot face. That was Tommy's final performance with Mariah as the imprisoned audience at Sing Sing. In 1997, while still trapped in the marriage, Mariah met baseball star Derek Jeter at a party. Their first kiss on the rooftop of a New York apartment building in a rainy night that she later encoded into the song The Roof. Jeter was not the great love. Mariah called him a catalyst, the person in the right place, at the right time, for the right purpose, to give her the courage to realize she deserved freedom. That short-lived relationship gave birth to some of the most beautiful songs of her career. The Roof, My All Honey, songs where she hid the truth in the melody because she couldn't say it outright, where music once again became the secret language she hoped one day someone would hear. Mariah filed for divorce in 1997. Mottola, years later in his memoir Hitman, admitted he was obsessed, but added that that obsession was also part of the reason for her success, a statement that showed even in retrospect, he still couldn't distinguish between love and possession. Mariah accused that after the divorce, Mottola used his influence to sabotage her career, especially around glitter. But that is the story of the next chapter. Here, what matters is this. Mariah finally escaped Sing Sing. For the first time in nearly a decade, she could sing the way she wanted. The album Butterfly, released in 1997, was a declaration of liberation. Hip-hop, R&B, The black identity that Tommy tried to erase throughout 5 years of marriage now poured into every song. The butterfly escaped the cocoon, but this newfound freedom would soon be tested by something she had never prepared to face. Complete public collapse in front of the eyes of the whole world watching and laughing. After escaping Sing Sing, Mariah created more freely than ever. Butterfly was highly praised by critics. Rainbow in 1999 continued the success. She left Sony Columbia, the label tied to Motola's name, and signed a huge contract with Virgin EMI worth about $100 million, one of the largest recording contracts in music history at the time. From the outside, this was an artist at the peak of creative power, finally free, finally in control of her career. But inside, Mariah was spinning in vortices no one could see. 3 years of dating Mexican legend Luis Miguel was falling apart. The pressure to prove herself worthy of the $100 million contract weighed on every decision. And the Glitter Project, both a soundtrack album and a movie, staked as the final affirmation that Mariah Carey could shine without Tommy Mottola's hand, was slipping out of her control. She had no decision-making power over the film. Early reviews from critics were brutal. The lead single Loverboy did not meet expectations, and she slept only 1 hour a day for an entire month. Her body was exhausted, her mind was exhausted, but she kept running because stopping meant facing everything she was running from. Then in July 2001, she stopped. Not because she chose to, but because her body and mind simultaneously refused to continue. The collapse did not happen in the shadows. It happened under the brightest lights in America. Mariah unexpectedly appeared on MTV's Total Request Live, the most popular live show in America at the time, where millions of teenagers were watching. She pushed an ice cream cart onto the stage, wearing an oversized t-shirt, began handing out ice cream to the audience, then took off her shirt to reveal a tank top and shorts, rambling with broken breaths while Carson Daly stood beside her completely bewildered, not knowing how to react on live television. The world reacted in the way 2001 still reacted to the mental health crisis of a famous woman, with laughter. MTV titled the clip Mariah's Ice Cream Meltdown. The media turned that moment into a joke that lasted for weeks. Howard Stern called her fat on national radio. She became a meme before the word meme even existed in the dictionary. Images of her were clipped, mocked, spread across the early internet as proof that Mariah Carey had lost her mind. No one asked why. No one asked if she was okay. No one saw the woman screaming for help amid the stage lights. Years later, in her memoir, Mariah explained that that appearance was a desperate, unrehearsed attempt to take control of the narrative when she felt the team around her was not protecting her. She compared herself to a comedian bombed on stage. All artists bomb. But her bomb created a chain reaction that put a target on her back for years afterward. 11 days after the TRL appearance, on July 25, 2001, Mariah showed up at her mother's house in a manic state and fainted. Patricia called 911. Mariah was taken to a hospital in Westchester County, New York, then transferred to Silver Hill Hospital, specializing in mental health in Connecticut, where she stayed for 12 days. She was discharged too early. In early September, she was hospitalized a second time at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. During the time she was hospitalized, Glitter hit theaters and failed miserably. The album of the same name sold so poorly it became a symbol of commercial failure in the music industry. EMI canceled the $100 million contract, paying her $28 million to leave. A huge amount for anyone, but the end for a career many believed was over. In the first hospitalization, doctors gave a diagnosis that Mariah would carry like a secret for nearly 2 decades. Bipolar II disorder, a condition causing episodes of depression interspersed with hypomania, emotional waves she could not control and could not predict. She didn't want to believe it. For the next 17 years, she lived with that diagnosis in absolute silence, not telling the public, not admitting it to herself, mistaking manic episodes for severe sleep disorders, living in denial and isolation and constant fear that someone would expose the secret she saw as a fatal weakness. It wasn't until April 2018, at age 48, that she went public in People magazine. By then, she was in therapy and on medication. She said the burden was too heavy, and she simply could not continue carrying it alone anymore. 17 years. 17 years, the freest voice in the world carried inside her a diagnosis she was so afraid of she didn't dare name it. 17 years, the woman standing before millions hid a part of herself because she believed if the world knew the truth, the world would turn its back. And perhaps she had reason to fear. In 2001, society did not yet have the language to talk about the mental health of celebrities without turning it into sensational headlines. There was no movement yet to name the kind of control she endured in her marriage. Britney Spears would publicly collapse 6 years later and also be turned into a joke before the world looked back with shame. Amanda Bynes 3 years after that. Mariah collapsed first in their generation. And she collapsed at a time when empathy did not yet exist in the vocabulary of mainstream media. She collapsed not because she was weak. She collapsed because she had endured too long. An unstable childhood in a home that was never quiet, nearly a decade imprisoned in a controlling marriage, crushing career pressure, breakups, bipolar disorder silently eroding from within without treatment, and her body finally did what her will refused to do. It stopped. Glitter failed. The $100 million contract was canceled. Mental health collapsed in front of the eyes of the whole world. Her career seemed over. The industry wrote obituaries. The media closed the coffin lid. The public moved on to the next star. But they all forgot one thing. Mariah Carey still had her voice. And that voice, the refuge she found from childhood in the unstable home in Long Island, though tested, controlled, mocked, had never truly left her. After the Glitter disaster, she signed a new contract with Island Def Jam and released the album Charm Bracelet in 2002, an album that sold moderately. Not a failure, but not enough to erase the image of the girl pushing an ice cream cart on TRL that the whole of America was still laughing at. The period from 2002 to 2004 was desert years, that few recount, because they had no dramatic moments to turn into headlines. Mariah appeared less before the media. She withdrew into herself. She was healing herself, even though she still hadn't publicly disclosed the bipolar diagnosis, even though she still carried that secret alone, even though she still mistook long sleepless nights for sleep disorders rather than hypomania. There was nothing glamorous in this period, just a woman quietly rebuilding brick by brick, patient to the point of near loneliness, preparing for something she didn't yet know would come, but refused to believe would never come. Then in April 2005 it came, the emancipation of Mimi, with Mimi being the intimate nickname only those closest to her called her. Even the album title was a declaration. She had escaped Tommy Mottola, escaped Sing Sing, escaped Glitter, escaped the obituary the entire music industry had written for her career. We Belong Together became a phenomenon no one predicted. 14 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song Billboard honored as the #1 song of the entire 2000s decade. The album achieved 7 times platinum certification and brought her 3 Grammy Awards: Best Female R&B Vocal Performance, Best R&B Song, Best Contemporary R&B Album. Not Grammy for pop, Grammy for R&B. That detail was more important than any commercial numbers. Because throughout nearly a decade of marriage to Mottola, Mariah was forced into a white pop mold, stripped of the urban element, her black identity half erased. Now she stood on the Grammy stage with 3 R&B awards in hand, proving she could succeed as her true self, her multiracial identity, music blending hip-hop and R&B, everything Tommy had tried to erase. This was not just a commercial comeback. This was the moment the entire music industry had to admit they were wrong to write her obituary, that this voice could not be killed, that the woman they mocked 4 years earlier was now standing higher than anywhere they had ever placed her. And amid that new peak, Mariah found what she had sought her whole life but never truly had, a relationship where she was not imprisoned. She first met Nick Cannon in 2005 at the Teen Choice Awards, but it was 3 years later, in 2008, when she invited him to play her love interest in the music video for Bye Bye that they began dating. And everything happened at a speed only 2 people who believed in miracles would dare risk. Married in the Bahamas just 1 month after dating, even before going public with the relationship. She was 38, he was 27. Nick was completely different from everything Tommy Mottola represented. Young, fun, not controlling, not surveilling. Worshipping her in a way she had never been worshipped without being bound along with it. For the first time in her life, Mariah was in a relationship where the door was not locked from the outside. Then, on April 30, 2011, the twin son and daughter Moroccan and Monroe Cannon were born. Monroe was named after Marilyn Monroe, the seductive icon Mariah had always admired. Moroccan after the Morocco-style room in their New York apartment, where Nick got down on one knee to propose. The two children changed everything. For a woman who grew up in a broken family, neglected, hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect her, children were not just joy, but a vow that the cycle would stop here, that these two children would have the childhood their mother never had, that their home would be quiet in the sense of peace, rather than quiet in the sense of emptiness. Moroccan and Monroe became the new anchor, something beyond the voice to hold on to, something no record label could cancel a contract on, no Billboard record could measure. But marriage, something Mariah had placed hope in twice, began to crack again. In 2014, Nick Cannon confirmed on television that the two had been living in separate homes for several months. He said there was trouble in paradise, but that his focus was the children. The divorce was finalized in 2016. Nick later admitted he would remarry her if he could, but he also knew that Mariah never gave second chances, something that perhaps says more about her strength than about coldness. But there was a detail more notable than the divorce itself. They maintained a good co-parenting relationship. The twins split time between both parents without becoming weapons, without becoming hostages, without becoming victims of adult egos. For a woman who grew up watching her brother push her mother into a wall, that was no small thing. It was proof that Mariah had learned something from her first marriage, that she knew the difference between ending a relationship and destroying a family. But in her mid-40s, looking back, the picture was still complex to the point of being hard to breathe. 2 divorces, single mother of 2, bipolar diagnosis still hidden, career no longer at its peak but still solid, and the Christmas smile the whole world waited for every year still bright no matter what was behind it. And coming up, she would step onto the biggest stage of New Year's Eve in front of millions of television viewers, where the world would witness the spotlight once again, refusing to forgive her. After divorcing Nick Cannon, Mariah seemed to find a new chapter in the form of Australian billionaire James Packer. He proposed with a 35-carat diamond ring, one of the most expensive celebrity engagement rings in history. And in that moment, the story seemed to be writing a fairy tale ending for the woman who had endured so much. But fairy tales did not exist in Mariah Carey's life. The relationship quickly became unhappy, and by October 2016, they called off the engagement. Mariah entered the final weeks of 2016 in a state of personal instability. A broken engagement, 2 divorces behind her, the bipolar diagnosis still a secret, and in front of her the biggest stage on New Year's Eve on the planet. On the night of December 31, 2016, Times Square, New York, Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve on ABC. Millions of television viewers across America and internationally were counting down. Mariah Carey stepped onto the stage to perform a medley of her hits, and from the first few seconds, it was clear something was wrong. She could not hear the backing track through her earpiece. The sound came in chaotic or not at all. She was confused, sang off tempo, stopped midway. With emotions, she gave up and told the crowd to let the audience sing for her. With We Belong Together, she lowered the mic while the music, including the pre-recorded vocals, continued playing through the speakers, exposing in front of millions the reality of lip-syncing that the live performance industry had kept hidden for decades. She told the crowd in a voice both helpless and sarcastic, "I'm trying to be real fair here," then commented, "Wonderful," then left the stage. The video spread across the internet in minutes. Once again, the world laughed. The blame war broke out immediately afterward. Mariah's management accused Dick Clark Productions of sabotage. The production company called the accusation ridiculous. The sound engineer declared all equipment worked perfectly. The truth lay somewhere in between and would probably never be fully clarified. But what mattered was not who was right or wrong. What mattered was this was the second time in her career Mariah collapsed in front of the cameras, and both times the world chose to laugh instead of asking if she was okay. The first time on TRL in 2001, she lost mental control and was mocked. This time, she did not lose control. She was betrayed by the technology, by the system, by the very stage that was supposed to serve her, and she was still mocked. The stage did not forgive, regardless of whose fault it was. She later said she was extremely embarrassed and believed that Dick Clark, who had passed away, would never have allowed an artist to go through that. But even in the embarrassment, she still retained what TRL in 2001 had taken away: self-control. She tweeted that very night, "It happened. Happy New Year, everyone." And the following year, she returned to perform on the exact same Times Square stage and succeeded brilliantly. But the bravest act in Mariah's life did not happen on any stage. It happened on the cover of People magazine in April 2018, when at age 48, she finally went public with the bipolar II disorder diagnosis she had hidden for 17 years. She said she was in therapy and on medication, that the medication did not make her too tired or sluggish, that she refused to let this illness define or control her. Divorcing Tommy Mottola required courage. Coming back after glitter required resilience. But going public with bipolar disorder required something harder than both combined. Taking off the final layer of armor, letting the whole world see the part she feared most being exposed, and believing the world would not use it to destroy her. The highest flying voice in the world, but the woman who owned that voice had to hide a part of herself for nearly 2 decades because she believed the truth would make everything she built collapse. And then, as if life wanted to compensate her with something no one could take away, time finally stood up and applauded. All I Want for Christmas Is You was released in 1994, achieved immediate commercial success, became a cultural phenomenon, ringing out every Christmas season in every shopping mall, every airport, every year-end party on the planet. But for 25 years, the song had never reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 because the ranking rules at the time did not allow songs not released as commercial singles to chart officially. The most famous Christmas song on earth, the song Guinness recognized with 3 world records, the song that by 2023 had generated $100 million in revenue, for a quarter of a century denied the position it deserved by a technical rule. Then in 2019, the Billboard rule changed, and the song finally climbed to the top. Mariah Carey became the only artist in history to have a #1 song on the Billboard Hot 100 in 4 consecutive decades: the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. This was the moment that if Mariah's story were football, this would be the night the opponents stood up and applauded. But not opponents. Time. 25 years of patience. The song denied its peak for a quarter of a century, then finally conquered, exactly like the woman who sang it, knocked down then standing up, mocked then honored, obituary written then proving that obituary was wrong. The world self-appointed her a title no agency needed to confirm: Christmas Queen. At age 50, Mariah seemed to have found a rare balance: bipolar diagnosis public and treated. Her greatest song finally at #1, dancer Brian Tanaka, bringing 7 years of rare stability. But family, the original wound that had never truly healed, was about to open one last time. In September 2020, Mariah Carey did something she had never done in 30 years of her career. She told the truth, the whole truth. The memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, was released and became a New York Times bestseller, not because of glamorous anecdotes, but because for the first time, the woman behind the voice flung open the door, leading into the home that was never quiet in Long Island, into the Sing Sing mansion, into the mental hospital, into every wound that stage lights had never shone on. She told Oprah that the book was not for revenge, but to live her truth. But truth had a price. In the memoir, Mariah revealed that on the advice of her therapist, she had renamed and reframed her family to protect her sanity. Her mother became Pat. Her brother Morgan became former brother. Her sister Allison became former sister. The new designations were not cruelty, but survival. About Allison, her sister's life was a prolonged tragedy with no beautiful ending. Addiction, HIV infection, multiple prison stints. Mariah wrote that Allison had once given her medication as a child, had once tried to hand her over to an older man, that it was safer emotionally and physically to have no contact. About Morgan, the memoir accused her brother of trying to extort her when she became famous. The consequences came in the form of legal papers. Allison sued Mariah for defamation. Morgan also sued. The family, which had already cracked when Mariah was 3, now faced each other through lawyers and court. Cutting off to survive, but cutting off hurt no less than holding on. But amid all those former sisters and former brothers, There was one relationship Mariah never completely severed, the relationship with her mother. Patricia Carey, the woman who gave her the voice and at the same time gave her a part of lifelong trauma. The thorny thread interwoven with pride and pain, shame and gratitude, jealousy and admiration, disappointment and all of. The thread we heard from the first chapter, stretching over more than 5 decades without ever being unraveled. She felt neglected by her mother. She believed her mother was jealous. But she also dedicated the memoir to that very woman, to Pat, my mother, who through it all, I believe, truly tried her best. I will love you as much as I can forever. In 2010, mother and daughter stood side by side on the stage of ABC's Christmas special, singing a duet, Patricia's classical soprano blending with Mariah's pop voice in a rare moment when the thorny thread seemed to soften. But the thread was never unraveled, and before the family tragedy struck, Mariah lost one more thing. Brian Tanaka, the backup dancer about 13 years younger than her, had been by her side since 2016, 7 years, the longest and most stable relationship in her life. At the end of 2023, Brian confirmed they had broken up. The rare stability was gone too. Mariah entered 2024 alone, and then on August 24, 2024. There are events that language should not try to decorate, where any added adjective is an insult. This was such an event. Mother Patricia and sister Allison both passed away on the same day. The same day. Mariah shared, "My heart is broken that I lost my mother last week." And tragically, in a turn of events, my sister also passed away on the same day. She said she was blessed to have spent the final week with her mother. The final week. In that final week was the thorny thread unraveled. Did mother and daughter say what needed to be said, what decades of pride, pain, and jealousy had prevented them from saying? Or was the thread cut before it was unraveled, and the unsaid words would forever remain unsaid? No one knows. Mariah did not tell, and this script will not fabricate an answer for her. Allison's lawsuit was still unresolved when she passed. Morgan continued to sue. The family ended not with a hug, but with death and unfinished legal proceedings. Father Alfred Roy Carey had passed away in 2002 from cancer, a father absent for most of her childhood after the divorce. As of 2024, Mariah had lost her father, lost her mother, lost her sister. The former brother was still alive, but the relationship existed in the form of court records rather than phone calls. Her biological family was almost gone. The woman whose voice had touched hundreds of millions at age 55 stood in the emptiness where family once existed. To understand Mariah Carey as a person most deeply, don't look at the stage but look at the way she mothers, because it is there that the biggest question of her life is being answered. Or at least, is being answered day by day. There is a cycle stretching across 3 generations of women in this family that, if not seen clearly, you will not understand why the twins are so important. The first generation, Patricia Carey, a Juilliard-trained opera singer, real talent, but a career that never reached the heights her talent deserved. She passed on to her daughter the voice, the greatest gift a mother can pass down. But she also passed on trauma, neglect, quiet jealousy when her daughter surpassed places she would never reach. A relationship so complex that the thorny thread connecting mother and daughter stretched over 5 decades without ever being unraveled until death cut it permanently. The second generation, Mariah, who inherited both the talent and the trauma, both the voice and the wound. The question of her life, though perhaps she never articulated it exactly like this, is how to keep the talent but discard the trauma. How to carry the gift without carrying the curse that comes with it. The third generation, Moroccan and Monroe. This is where the cycle can be broken or repeated, and everything Mariah does in her role as a mother is an effort to answer that question. The twins are the absolute center of her life outside of music. She called them Dem babies when they were little, later Dem kids as they grew older. Affectionate nicknames she used as if creating a private world for the 3 of them, where the media and the past could not reach. She brought her children onto the stage in Christmas specials, letting them appear naturally, without forcing, without pushing them into the spotlight before they were ready. Monroe especially loves singing, and here the voice cycle repeats once again. Patricia passed it to Mariah. Mariah passes it to Monroe, 3 generations of women connected by music. But the question is 'tis not whether Monroe inherits the voice, The question is whether Monroe inherits the accompanying trauma, and this is where Mariah breaks from the cycle. Patricia grew up with an unfulfilled opera dream, then became jealous when her daughter succeeded more than her. Mariah grew up succeeding beyond imagination, then determined not to become her mother. She does not push her children into a music career. She allows them a normal childhood, something she never had in Long Island, something the home that was never quiet had taken from her. She protects her children from the media, shares its images on social media but controls the narrative, does not let tabloids shape Moroccan and Monroe's identities before they can shape their own. And perhaps most importantly, she and Nick Cannon maintain a good co-parenting relationship after divorce. For a woman who grew up watching her brother push her mother into a wall, who grew up in a home where her father was absent from the time she was 3, that is no small thing. It is proof that divorce does not have to destroy the children if both sides prioritize them over their own egos, that the broken family model she grew up in is not an unchangeable fate. As of 2026, Moroccan and Monroe are 15 years old, in their teenage years, splitting time between both parents. Monroe shows singing talent but is at the age of finding her own identity, and it is not easy to find your own identity when your mother is Mariah Carey, when your mother's voice is something the entire planet has heard for 4 decades. Mariah says she is very happy focusing on her children and her career. And that statement, which sounds ordinary at first, actually contains an entire journey. The woman who once needed to escape her family to survive now finds happiness when staying close to her own family. Mariah grew up in a home where she needed to escape. She built a home where her children can stay. This is an achievement with no display case, no Grammy, no Billboard #1, no Guinness World Records. But perhaps it is more important than all of those combined. Because 19 #1 songs will lie in record books, but 2 children loved the right way will live in the real world, carrying proof that the cycle of trauma can be broken. Mariah at age 57 has lost almost her entire birth family but has built a new family. The voice is still there, the children are growing up, and the world still has not let her go. When an artist's stage shifts from a competitive arena to a ceremony of honor, that is often a sign that the final chapter has begun. But for Mariah Carey, this chapter does not read like a goodbye, but like a statement that she is not done yet. On January 30, 2026, at the Los Angeles Convention Center, 2 nights before the Grammy Awards, Mariah was honored as Musique Carey's Person of the Year, one of the most prestigious honors in the music industry, not awarded for voice or sales, but for the overall career and humanitarian commitment. Jennifer Hudson, John Legend, Charlie Puth, Foo Fighters, Luffy, Kesha, Maggie Rogers took turns stepping onto the stage to sing her music. Jermaine Dupri, the colleague friend whom Tommy Mottola once sent an armed search team to find when she went out for a late-night meal with him 30 years earlier, played a DJ set. The Musique Carey's director said that Mariah Carey's influence goes far beyond her astonishing artistry. The entire music industry stood up to honor the woman they had written an obituary for 25 years earlier, not just for the voice, but for the person, for Camp Mariah that she founded for underprivileged children, for Hurricane Katrina relief, for the Protect the Dolls shirt auctioned for over $5,000 for the transgender community. 9 days after that gala, Mariah set foot in Milan and stepped onto the biggest stage on the planet. The opening ceremony of the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics, February 2026, in front of billions of global television viewers. She arrived in Italy in true Mariah style, and that image shows that even at age 56, even after her body and life had been through everything possible, she was still her. But perhaps the event that says the most about Mariah's journey is not on any stage, but in a small line on an album cover. In 2025, she signed with Gamma, an independent label, and released the album Here for It All under the Mariah label, her own label, bearing her name, controlled by her. The album entered the top 10 on the Billboard 200. For the first time in her nearly 4-decade career, Mariah fully owned her art. No Tommy Mottola deciding what she had to sing. No Sony controlling the image. No major label standing between her and the music. The path from the 18-year-old girl signed by a powerful man who wanted to own her voice, to the 55-year-old woman releasing under a label bearing her own name. That was not a comeback. That was a 37-year liberation journey finally reaching its destination. And while she prepares for the future, a documentary in production with Sony Pictures, a feature film adaptation of the memoir led by director Lee Daniels, plans to organize residencies in multiple European countries, the past also closes its circle quietly. The original 1988 demo tape, the very tape that Brenda Kay, star placed in Tommy Mottola's hands that night, the tape that changed her life forever in ways she could not imagine, was auctioned for $54,500. The tape that started it all, now a museum artifact, the circle completed. In an interview with Billboard in early 2026, when asked about the legend title, Mariah replied, "I don't call myself a legend. I'm still working, still trying." After nearly 40 years of career, 19 #1 songs, 5 Grammy Awards, 220 million records sold, an estimated net worth of $350 million, she still sees herself as trying. That statement, which sounds humble at first, actually reveals something deeper. It is the sign of a person who has never felt safe enough to rest, who has never reached a place where she could breathe out and say enough, because her entire life had taught her that everything could be taken away at any moment. Family, freedom, mental health, fame, love, and only the voice, only the work is what she could control. Mariah, at age 57, does not have a neat, perfect Hollywood ending. She is a complex collage, commercial obligations, quiet family moments, echoes of lawsuits and old wounds, and daily efforts so that her 2 15-year-old children grow up knowing they are loved the right way. But there is one thing, throughout all the peaks and valleys, all the marriages and divorces, all the collapses and stand-ups, that has never left her. Mariah Carey is not the radiant Christmas queen whose life is only lights and tinsel, nor the tragic diva whose life is only collapses and scandals. She is a human being who has lived at the absolute extremes of human experience. She once stood on stage in front of millions and delivered the purest joy that mainstream music can create. And she has also lain in a mental hospital, hiding the bipolar disorder diagnosis for 17 years because she believed if the world knew, the world would destroy her. Only remembering the brilliant peaks is to whitewash the story and make her less human. Only remembering the collapses is a profound injustice to the legacy she has built with everything she has. She did not just collect awards and records, she changed the way the world sings. The melisma style that Vision of Love introduced in 1990 gave birth to an entire generation of singers, rewrote the rules about female vocals in mainstream music, proved that vocal technique and real emotion are not two opposites but one. In an era when the pop music industry is increasingly formulaic and assembly line produced, Mariah reminded millions that the voice can carry real emotion, that music can simultaneously compete fiercely on the charts, and be breathtakingly beautiful in the headphones of someone listening alone at midnight. An unstable childhood in a home that was never quiet, lack of protection from her mother, nearly a decade imprisoned in a controlling marriage, collapse in front of the eyes of the whole world, 17 years hiding the diagnosis, losing her father, then losing her mother and sister on the same day, all combined to create an artist whose deepest goal was not conquest but healing. She sang to heal herself, and in the process she healed millions of people she would never meet. Mariah Carey's real legacy does not lie in the Grammy cabinet or on the Billboard charts. It lies in every child singing, "All I Want for Christmas Is You," in their bedroom on Christmas night, knowing nothing about Sing Sing or the butter knife or the mental hospital, only knowing that this song makes tonight warmer. It lies in every woman turning on Hero at the darkest moment of her life and feeling less alone because someone sang exactly what she needed to hear. It lies in every young girl trying to reach the whistle register in the bathroom, because Mariah showed her how high the voice can fly. The legacy lies in the feeling that no matter how many times life has pulled you down, you can still sing and that song can still soar. At the beginning of this story, we said that the tragedy of Mariah Carey is that the world only hears the voice but does not hear the cry for help inside. But now, after 57 years, perhaps we are finally beginning to hear the woman behind that voice. Through all the peaks and losses, through the mistakes and time, the joy she brings to the world is still her own. No one gave it to her, and no one can take it away. When looking back at the extraordinary journey of Mariah Carey, what is the first thing you think of? The five-octave voice, the Christmas smile, or the quiet strength of a woman who stood up every time she was knocked down? Share in the comments below, and let's together honor the woman who made the world feel a little less alone. If this story touched you, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories, where we look through the halo to find the real person behind the legends. Thank you for being here until the very end. See you in the next video.